experiencing it, it can have a traumatic effect on you. So I'll give you a really concrete example. If you were to, let's say, watch the news in the last, 2 or 3 years, you would have seen many stories of black boys and black men getting shot and murdered by the police. That can have a traumatic effect on you simply by observing that. Because one, it increases feelings of paranoia, increases feelings of fear, increases feelings of anxiety, and hate. Exactly. All these things can play a huge role, and that's called vicarious trauma. Sometimes we feel like just because it didn't happen to me, it won't have an impact. It happened to someone close to you, someone that looks like you, or someone you have any kind of relationship with, it can really impact you. A question, sir?
That happened to me. I was working. Saw this guy in Ashland, and he was about 140 pounds.
Yeah.
Like 3 cops after he was already dated and
Right.
down and he wasn't even resisting. He was standing like that mental issue.
Yeah.
And he still was acting like, and I was
Like he was a threat.
outside yelling at them and didn't really, because I was watching them and I was saying what they were doing was wrong.
Right.
People passing by and forth like it's nothing. And
Yeah.
watching them say nothing. Even though people will say, well, you don't really matter, come and get you. Well, I can't stand by and don't say nothing and see it's abuse.
Yeah.
Already got one subdue and then 2 more after come. That's like 600 pounds on a 140 pound.
Right. Right. That overkill that tends to happen. When you're perceived as a threat, that can really have a negative impact on how you see yourself and how the world sees you. Right. Something else that tends to happen in terms of racism is feeling unrecognized or invisible or unappreciated, having to constantly work twice, 3 times as hard just to get recognition that others get just by existing. And that's part of the mental health struggle that minorities, black people, and specifically black men have to deal with. And like I mentioned, then all of that can lead to feelings of stress, anxiety, depression, anger. Now, one of the interesting things is the way that depression looks in men can sometimes be different than in women. Depression often is characterized as really low feelings, isolation, negative thoughts about yourself, and what we imagine in our minds is someone sitting down or laying on a bed and just having their heads down and feeling sad. But what happens for some is that depression actually looks like anger, because that is how men are socialized to be, to sort of externalize their feelings. So there are instances where you or someone you know be really angry all the time, and it can be the result of actual depression. Right? So that was sort of racial trauma. Now we'll talk about personal trauma. Now this often gets overlooked as well, specifically with men. But I want to give like a general idea of trauma, just in case if anyone didn't quite get it. Trauma, especially personal trauma, is when experience happens that overwhelms one's ability to cope. What that means is something really, really bad happened to you, and your body or your mind shuts down because it doesn't know how to react to it. Sometimes that leads to freezing or feelings of fight or flight and those kinds of things. They lead to feelings of, right, and that's a major one as well. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Also, feelings of helplessness play a huge role in that. A diminished sense of self. What that means is a diminished sense of how you view yourself. A lower self plays a huge role. And it diminishes the ability to feel a full range of emotions. Your emotions are what we call restricted, where you are only comfortable feeling sadness and anger, or sadness and fear, or things along those lines. Something that's really important as well is the idea of generational curses. Now, specifically for men, oftentimes the things that happen to us, especially when we're young, the traumatic things, do not get the same amount of attention. One, because they don't happen as often as they do with women, but two, because of society as well. And so women are not the only ones that get abused, that get attacked, molested. All these kinds of things happen to men. And these can lead to curses because the men are not comfortable speaking up, and they hold on to it. They hold on to that anger that comes with it. They hold on to that helplessness that comes with it. They hold on to all of these things that come with that. And then without knowing, they raise up children of trauma. And the reality is you can't raise a child properly if you are still with so many traumatic instances yourself. And then you teach a child to learn and to react a certain way, and then teach their children. And that's how we end up with these generational curses.
Just one quick thing. We are taught to express ourselves. You know, whenever there's always intention to show the emotions.
Right.
So the things we are going through, it makes us not wanting. That's why even when it comes to relationships, whenever in a relationship and a woman with a counsel, a man thinks
Right.
because he doesn't want to be example when he expresses.
Right. And it's seen as feminine and not manly to be able to speak your emotions. Reality is men have just as many emotions as women. They're just expressed in different ways. And what happens is when you sit and you hold on to your emotions and come off as stoic or having no feelings, it doesn't mean you don't have any. It means that you're pushing them down. And the way emotions tend to work is they don't sit there quietly as you sort of bury them. They build, and they build and they build until eventually it gets to the point where something small happens and it explodes, and we take it out on those who we love the most. One of the things I always try and tell people is that if you do not make mental health a priority now, it will make itself a priority later. And when that happens, it's never a good thing. So we always want to make sure we can make our mental health a priority. Right? Let's talk about emotions. So much of emotions and the struggles that men have is admitting them, admitting that you have them. And when I say emotion, something other than anger, something other than sadness, right? And a lot of fighting your pride, fighting the idea that this mystical thing that's holding us back from expressing how we feel. The pride is about to always go before, and pride often gets in the way of mental health therapy. And even if it's not hardcore therapy, talk to your children, your wife, your friends, your brothers, whoever it is. Express yourself properly if you are always afraid of how you're going to look. Now, there's this concept of weakness versus strength. The idea that if I express myself, I am weak. But we don't really think about the idea that emotion, having to express is more difficult expressing anger and frustration. It is stronger to express your emotions than it is to hold on to them. It is much easier to hold on to them and to keep it buried, because that's sort of human instinct. That's instinct to sort of do that. It takes strength to be able to tell someone how you feel. And so I'm hoping one day we as a society can switch this concept of having feelings means that you're weak. And the reality is being able to have feelings and express them is one of the strongest and most important things you can do. Also, you want to be able to come to a point where you can accept the fact that you are sad, that you're hurt, you are in love, all these things. Be able to accept it and to own it instead of consistently fighting it for fear of what that might mean for you. When the reality is, all it means is that you're a full, authentic human, because we all experience the same kinds of things. Make sure, as I stated before, there's a difference between letting go of a situation and burying it. And 90% of the time when someone says they let go of something, that means they're burying it. They're taking those emotions and stuff and said, I'm fine. Letting go is accepting that a situation happened and being at peace with the fact that it happened. That doesn't mean you still can't be upset. It just means that you're at peace with the fact that it happened. That's true letting go. And very few of us get to that point. Most of us just tend to bury things down and stuff them down. Any questions about that before I move on?
How do we go about changing all that? Saying all that stuff goes back to what I said, it starts in the family, how we've been taught.
Right.
So if that is something that we've been taught and it's easy for a man to show his emotions through anger, anger might lead to physical issues.
Right.
So when it comes to that kind of stuff, then that means that people need recognize it in who they see, what's going on, to be able
Hmm.
to do it because the person themselves don't express because it could be like weakness or even anybody, man or women, they don't like to be vulnerable.
Right.
That's why a lot of times people are trying to get to know each other. A lot of things that happened before in their relationship that was hurtful, it's hard to bring it back out
Right.
because they're afraid that it will
Happen again.
not just that, but afraid to bring out that vulnerableness.
Hmm.
They don't want any, any hurt.
Exactly. And so it's a simple answer, but not an easy answer. There's a slight difference there. Essentially, what I have here is the way you do it. Focusing on and practicing admitting and accepting your emotions. And other people, not just saying you need to do this, you need to do that. That needs to start with us. Because if you're not doing it, if you're not modeling it, no one's going to want to hear that from you. Being able to sit there and say, what am I feeling right now? Can I go deeper more than just anger? Because the thing that comes before anger is always hurt, 100% of the time. There will always be humiliation and feelings of abandonment that come before anger. Can you admit those things? Can you admit the sensitive parts and accept it? Because admitting it is only one step. The next part needs to be accepting the fact that you have those feelings. And that's how you work at what we call processing the emotion, working it through, not just stuffed inside of us, but we're actually getting it out on a regular basis, talking to those you love, and if you, or those who you feel like you can trust to be able to hold on to these emotions and not judge you. All right. So let's talk about some warning signs of just general mental health issues when your mental health is not at its best. Now, this is important because oftentimes with some of these, we all experience them to some degree, and that's a normal part of human life. But when we experience them on a consistent basis or in extreme ways, then that becomes a sign where your mental health is not where it should be. So, prolonged feeling of sadness, right? Not just feeling sad from something that happened, but a prolonged feeling of sadness that goes way beyond maybe a precipitating event. We say prolonged, that's a pretty general statement. It sort of depends on a lot of different things. But if you find yourself feeling really sad for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and not sure why, then that's a sign your mental health is not where it should be. Also, unwillingness to leave the bed or the house, that's what we call isolating yourself. Those are not healthy ways of going about things. Now, this doesn't mean you had a long week and you want to sleep in over the weekend, right? That's a normal way of being. I'm talking about days and weeks on end where you do not want to engage with anyone, right? And then the Bible talks about not forsaking the fellowship of the saints. We are social beings. Now, an introvert like me, you don't want to be social all the time, but every now and then we should have interaction with other people. Suicidal thoughts and jokes about wanting to harm yourself or hurt yourself. Oftentimes, real feelings can be expressed through jokes. Now, in many ways, some people are just joking. And if you feel like they are, then those are things they shouldn't joke about because they're pretty serious topics. Distancing from your family and friends, assuming they haven't done anything to you necessarily, you want to make sure that to keep an eye out for these kinds of things. Drastic change in eating habits. You're going long periods of time with not eating a lot, or periods of time where you're eating way more than you usually would, is what we call binging, and then maybe purging the food right after. Those are signs where your mental health is not where it's so supposed to be, and those are usually signs of wanting and needing control in your life and feeling like you're out of control. Feelings of extreme highs and lows. Maybe you go 2-3 weeks of feeling really high, like you could do anything in the world, barely sleeping, running around, and then 2 or 3 weeks of feeling really low and really sad. It can be, yeah. Excessive fears, worries, and anxieties, things that consistently hamper your day because you're nervous, you're having panic attacks, you're shaking, you're consistently thinking about the what ifs, what if. That's a good sign of anxiety. Dramatic change in sleep habits, like I said, sleeping for a really long time, sleeping way more than you usually do, or not sleeping enough. Or strange thoughts about things that are really unfamiliar and strange and cause people to sort of to have worries Those are also another warning signs of poor mental. So, right. So, strange is a broad term. We use that term. Essentially, it's the premise is that you're having thoughts that are not really based in reality, right? So the idea that you're starting to wonder if people are chasing you when they're not really chasing. You're starting to wonder if, well, maybe do I have a special ability to communicate with inanimate objects, or they're communicating with me, for instance. A common thing we hear is hearing voices. That's a popular one, but there are a lot of other ones as well. Just thoughts really have reality. So these are some general ways to cope. I always want to make sure we give ways to deal with these things. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming, these conditions that we all have and deal with. And so one of the ways, especially as Christians, one of the Bible says to do is to keep track of your blessings, right? What that means is you are blessed way more than anything else. And if you continually keep track of that, that in itself leads to a betterment of your mood and can improve your mood. Just be aware and thankful for all the blessings that you've had. Be kind to yourself. Treat yourself with kindness and respect, and avoid self-criticism. Do not spend long periods of time beating yourself up over what ifs and why. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? I'm such a horrible person. I'm not smart enough. These things lead to a depressed mood and are not healthy. Take care of your body. We should know this. One of the things we focus on in the SDA Church is the combination of our physical health and our spiritual health, and also the mental health. Sleep, diet, relaxation, exercise, all of those are important, especially with the eating. This is something I try and tell everyone. If you are struggling with any kind of mental health issue, eating will make it much worse. Being weak will make your anxiety worse. It will make your depression deeper. It will make your paranoia worse. It will make your sleep worse. All of these things get worse if you do not eat on a regular basis. We want to make sure our body is strong. Yep, you have a question? I'm sorry, say it again. Some people eat poor when they're depressed. Right. And so it's all about moderation. Moderation in all things. And some people eat or when they're depressed, because eating feels good and it's a temporary satisfaction, and the hope is that you'll feel better afterwards. But that usually doesn't happen, because then you feel bad because you ate more than what you usually like. And so you want to make sure not to go overboard with it. It's just sort of keeping your body strong and keeping your body healthy. Mm-hmm.
When you are in a depressed mood, you won't be trying to the depression itself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then a lot of times too, that drug medicine that people are given has side effects of suicidal thoughts and depression.
Right.
A lot of these people taking medications that actually bring it on, who's going to be addicted.
Right. And so it's always a tricky thing. The goal is for us to utilize these things when you are feeling the first signs that your mental health might not be where it should be. If it gets to the point where none of these things are working, if your depression is that deep, for instance, then you must seek out some external help and more in forms of treatment. Simply just hold on to it and sit on it. And for some that is medication, but for the majority they don't need it. Oh yes, faster. Oh yes. So what that is it's just a sort of a lighthearted thing, talking about the important foundations of a good mental health, right? And so just talks about the various aspects of what's necessary for a good mental health, and much of that is discussed here as well, you know. And so, but yes, we're going back to the medications. That's not something that you need all of the time, but it does for some people. It is necessary, and what it is you work with a psychiatrist to make sure that the side effects are limited, and that because it's different for each person in so many different ways, to see if, hey, do I need a different kind of medication, and so you have options to look at it. Breaking up the monotony is also a big thing too. If you have a regular schedule where you do the exact same things all the time in the exact same way, that can lead to not only boredom, but it can worsen a depression too. Switch it up. Drive a different way to work. Find a way to take a small vacation or even a staycation if you got to stay at home, for instance. Find a way to be creative so that you give your brain a different way to think about things. Also, managing your stress. Life is hard. Life is stressful. Be aware of the fact that you're stressed. Prayer. Prayer is a big factor that we have access to an all-knowing, all-powerful God who is there to be able to look after us, and that's an important thing. Talking with others is a big one as well, specifically for men. Being able to just talk to your friends about superficial surface things, deeper. Share with someone if you're struggling with topics. Share with somebody if you're willing to actually seek out a therapist, and share it with somebody just to get it off your burden. You have to get the burden off your shoulders. Not just anybody. Someone who's able to listen and can keep. Exactly. You want to make sure that it's someone you can trust. You've known for a while. All right, so we're wrapping up here. For those who are interested in seeking therapy, I've mentioned some of this before, but just you want to make sure that you keep an open mind, and this is some general things to keep in mind. Oftentimes, when we talk about therapy, the first thing we think about are the obstacles. What is going to stop me from doing it? That's just what pops. A lot of people said, "Oh, this is too much. It's too expensive. When will I find the time?" And then, so my pride. I don't feel like I need to go to anybody. I can just talk to friends. I can just pray. I can just do all these things, and those are good things. But we have access to more. And the reality is, one, we find the things that are most important to us, we are able to prioritize. We always find time for the things that we want the most. If you are really, really sick, physically sick, you are going to find time to make it to the doctor, right? And so the goal is to not wait until you get so mentally sick that you have to do some extreme things, but you want to make it a priority. Also, there are many low-fee therapy options as well, and I'll give you some resources as I have before. There are many low-fee therapy options as well where you do not have to pay a lot of money. In many cases, they'll take your work insurance, and so these things exist. It's just up to us to be able to do what it takes to find them. What to expect when it comes to therapy. The number one thing that we just talked about with Pastor is confidentiality. When you go to an actual therapist, they are required by law and by ethics to keep what you are saying completely confidential. The exceptions only being if they feel like you're a danger to yourself or to someone else, and in some cases, depending on the state, if there was abuse of a child that has happened and a child can still be in danger, because that's about safety. Outside of that, you can tell a therapist that you just robbed a bank, and by law, they cannot share that with anybody. Right? Now let's hope we're not robbing any banks, but you can tell them anything, and they cannot share. They can't share it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you have a plan on it, that's about safety, and that has to be reported. If, for instance, you did it already, then the therapist could likely keep that to themselves. Yep. Right. If you did it already, because then it's no longer a matter of safety. So as you can see, even those in extreme situations, the confidentiality plays a big role. Right. So when also you're gonna get a bunch of personal questions when you go to therapy. That's sort of the point, to be able to talk about important and deep things, and they're going to ask you things that you might not be used to being asked, and that can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary to get to where it is you're trying to go. Emotional fatigue as well. If you're in therapy and you're going to feel, if it's really going where it's supposed to go, you're going to feel tired when you're done. And that's something important to think about. But the most important thing is it's about growth. You're going to feel a sense of growth if you go on a consistent basis. So we're just about wrapping up for today. This last thing is just a bunch of resources that I have found to be helpful, just a few. One is called the Center for Anxiety Disorders, and it talks about trauma and anxiety and what they look like, and has of resources for how to deal with them. We all deal with some kind of anxiety, or if you have some trauma in your background, these are ways that give you steps to deal with it. All right. Another site is called Pro Bono Counseling. Is exactly what it says. It gives you therapy options for really low fee or free. So you have that option. OpenPathCollective.org is also a really low fee website. You put in your zip code and they find the closest people to you. Psychology Today is another really popular website where those will have their fees will vary on Psychology Today, because that's a really popular website, but it's the resource for you to have. And then also you want to make sure you explore employee assistance programs. Many of our jobs, not all of them, many of our jobs have employee assistance programs where they have something structured where you can get therapy like 5, 6, 10 sessions in your job. Not necessarily in your job, but you know, go outside of the job, but it's through your job to be able to get some therapy. So I want to make sure I left you guys with some options and different things to do. So you don't want to feel like there's this huge problem and I have no way to deal with it. So with that being said, we're just about done. Any questions, thoughts? Yes, Sister Faye. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish I had a fancy answer, but there isn't. It's a very direct one. These are things that if you do therapy, you have to double down on and do all of the time. Self-care has to be a massive part. Two, a good therapist always gets their own therapy. In the most literal sense, you might see people all the time, but you need to go see someone as well who is good for you, who you can express to, because it's not for everybody and it can have real risks and there can be high burnout. And so you have to consistently be aware of your emotions, especially as a man. Accept your emotions. If you're sitting with someone and they're making you feel something, or if they said something that triggered your own issues, you have to be aware of it. You have to be conscious of it. You have to be willing to deal with it. You have to be willing to talk with others and to pray and to, like I said, seek your own therapy. You have to do all of these things. These are really important for people who don't offer therapy, but they are essential for those who do. These are things that must happen on a regular basis. Say it again. Those who have issues. Right. So there are therapists who are dealing with a lot and feel like because what they're dealing with, they need the medication if they're suffering from something. But you don't want to take medication just because the people that are coming in are burdening you so much. You wouldn't want to take it just for that. But if you have your own anxiety issues, depression, whatever it is, then of course, you have to be able to model what it is that you want others to do. Any other last questions or thoughts, feelings? All right. Well, thank you all so much. It's good to see you. Hope to be back here again next month. We can talk about some more things. All righty. Thank you. Thank you.
Before Christmas or after?
Before.
You don't want picture, Patrick? You don't want picture?
Oh, I had one already.
We want to say thank you. Let's put our hands together. I want to thank Dr. Juanza McIntosh for sharing Sabbath time with us and sharing professional information from the top about engaging, living healthier lives. Living healthier lives really is crucial. Mental health is crucial to our entire well-being. Some of the stories we read from the top, even from the top of any professional arena, right down to community.